Hi there. Hey, hello. Good day, everyone, and welcome to our live webinar on Headless SEO. I'm Alina. How are you? What's your day like? From where are you watching us? I'm delighted to see you are here today, and I hope that you are all ready to learn about the exciting world of Headless SEO. Hello. Today's webinar is all about modern SEO related headless CMS websites. Our expert speaker is Lidia Infante, will share her knowledge and expertise and answer any questions that you may have about the topic. So, guys, sit back, relax, and get ready to learn. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to your active participation in today's webinar. Great. Hello, Simon. Hello, Maria. Hello, Regina. Happy to see you here. Welcome, everyone. Who am I? I'm Alina Prohada, and I'm social media marketing and community specialist at Serpstat, the go-to platform to speed up search marketing goals achievement. Firstly, let me give you a brief overview of our platform. It helps find the proper keywords, identify and analyze your competitors, almost all sites backlinks, track daily rankings, audit websites, and manages your teams, and many, many more. Additionally, we provide warm online support, free manuals, tutorials, webinars, and Twitter chats. And today we are covering SEO in the age of headless CMS, best practices with Lidia Infante. And before we start, I'll tell you a few things about the format. The duration is about 60 minutes. And guys, prepare your questions, send them to the chat on YouTube on your control panel. We will answer them during the Q&A session. Everyone registered to the webinar via sign up page will receive the webinar materials on their email. I'll send the page to the chat. Please make sure you have registered here. Here it is. So it's time to meet our speaker. Hi, Lydia.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine, thank you. How is your day?
It's going good. I was so excited all day to join this webinar. Since I first started talking about headless SEO, my understanding of it has evolved so much, and I'm very keen to share with you what I've learned.
Oh, thank you very much. I see that I have some issues with my camera. Let me change that. Oh, okay. Great. So um, I'm really happy to see you here as our speaker today. And let me introduce you for our attendees in a couple of words. So Lidia Infante is Senior SEO Manager at Sanity IO. As a consultant and speaker, she has been working in SEO for nearly a decade, helping businesses in SaaS, media, and e-commerce grow online. She often writes about SEO trends and best practices and has a BSc in psychology and a master in digital business. And I'm eager to learn from a professional like you, Lydia, today. And guys, enjoy the topic and prepare your questions. Lydia, here you are.
Awesome. All right, let's talk about headless SEO then, shall we? Okay, let me tell you a little bit about this. My name is Lidia Infante. I've been in SEO for about 8 years. I've been in media, in SaaS, in e-commerce, agency side, in-house. I've been a little bit all over the industry. I'm currently the Senior SEO Manager at Sanity IO. And Sanity is a composable content cloud that can be used as a headless CMS and is part of the headless architecture type of tools. So I had worked with headless CMSs before I moved to Sanity, but working for Sanity, I had to get a much deeper understanding of how headless SEO works and how to do it correctly. So I thought I'd gather all my thoughts into a few guides, some slides, and share it with you all. So let's begin with what headless SEO is. And it seems a little bit recursive. Headless SEO is the unique processes required to optimize content for search using a headless CMS. It sounds recursive because in order to understand what headless SEO is, we need to understand what is a headless CMS and more specifically how is doing SEO on a headless CMS any different than doing it on a traditional CMS like the classic WordPress. I'm sure everybody in the chat has experienced. Right, so essentially a headless CMS can be defined a bit in opposition to what a monolithic or traditional CMS is. A traditional CMS has three parts. It's got the database with where all of your content and data is stored. It's got the admin interface. The admin interface is the bit where we, as marketing professionals, go in, update content, change content, go on to see a preview of what our content's going to look like. And then it's got a view layer. All of this stuff is tied to each other, it's coupled, and it cannot be separated. So the view layer that we are most familiar with is likely going to be a website. And that's what our users are going to be looking at, where our users are going to be interacting with our content. So these three elements all very closely tied together. Then when it goes on headless, we separate the view layer from the admin interface. Instead of having a classic database, we've got what we call a data layer that interacts with the admin interface. The admin interface is essentially the same thing that you've been working with all these years, where you go in, edit your content, update it, add new stuff, etc. You can also create custom integrations. You can connect your content with anything with an API in theory. So you can choose to connect with Shopify, with BigCommerce, any of your favorites. But the interesting stuff is that the view layer is completely separated from the admin layer and the database. So your content can be used anywhere. You can reuse your content on apps. If you are a merchant that's selling on your website and on Etsy, you could potentially push your content directly onto Etsy or Amazon. You could use you're optimizing for voice search, or if you have one of those smart fridges and for some reason your fridge, your apps, and your content are relevant for a smart fridge, it can potentially also be featured in there. But it can also work in digital signage in stores. So, for example, if you go to a Burger King store, you will see that instead of the classic billboards, printed billboards that they used to have, they've got essentially screens, and those screens are being managed from a headless CMS. So, how is doing SEO any different with this tech stack? The very first thing is instead of thinking about pages, we need to think about content. That's what we call content modeling. I'm going to dive into it a little bit later after this. We also unlock the possibility of doing omni-channel SEO and unleashing our content all over the place, as you saw on the concept of the view layer being separated from the content and the admin layer. And I think this is more of a con, but it's definitely a difference. You've got limited plugins and add-ons. Nothing is a given, and you can't just fix an issue that you have by adding a plugin in. But let's take a look at content modeling. This is an excerpt from our content modeling guide by Carrie Hain. She works for Sanity. She's the principal content strategy at Sanity, and she's essentially the world expert in content modeling and structured content. So she defines it as the process of defining the types of content needed, the attributes of each one, and the relationships between them. And if I told you that I understood this the first time that I took a look at her guide or started learning about her content, I would be completely lying. I did not understand this. I tried to reduce it to thinking about content types, its attributes, and relationships. But it didn't really click for me until I started doing content modeling on my own for a little side project that I had started with my husband. My husband wanted to be able to make a shopping list based on a list of recipes that we were going to eat every week. Okay, sorry if this is too much information, but he's a developer and he wanted to see how technology could make his day-to-day tasks easier. So we decided to build an app, um, a recipe-based shopping list generator. We had to model the content to be able to pull this off. So the end result that we wanted was a shopping list with a list of all the ingredients that he had to buy that week. But in order to get the ingredients, we had to choose the recipes. So each recipe needed to have a list of ingredients to it. And then, in order to make the choosing easier, an image, a description. Why not have the instructions in there, and because we're very health conscious, also the nutritional info and the time to cook so that we could plan our week accordingly. But then we also have another thing going on, which is my husband's vegetarian and I am not. So we needed to mark the recipes with whether they were vegetarian or omni for everybody. Um, so every recipe has a list of ingredients to it. And every ingredient also has a series of attributes to it. Allergen info, we added an image to them as well, whether they're vegetarian, vegan, or neither. Um, and then by putting a list of recipes into a shopping list, it would pull a list of ingredients. Now, if you've ever cooked a recipe, you know that every recipe tells you to use oil and salt. Oil and salt are pantry staples. You don't need to buy them every time that you start to cook. So we wanted to mark that into our content model as well. I hope this is making sense. This really helped me personally get the concept of content modeling because this meant that I had different content types and collections of content and attributes. I think the relationships between each of these is really clear. Well, we do have a Q&A at the end in case this is nonsense. All right. Um, then the next step, oh, I'm reading somebody say that they want this app. This app is actually already created. We meant to turn this into our side gig and potentially make a ton of money from it by connecting our CMS to an API that measured how expensive it would be to shop your shopping list in different supermarkets in the UK, and then actually go and do the order online, but someone else has already done this. So now this is just a concept of an app that we were going to make. I think he's currently using the app that somebody else made. But it is very cool, and I hope whoever did this before us is making money of it. The other opportunity that Headless SEO opens up for you is going omni-channel. Um, I believe this was last year. Was this last year? Yes. Last year, Google made this blog post going beyond the search box, introducing multi search, where they were asking you to search with your phone. If you're on Android, I'm on Android. I'm an Android girl. I got this message when I was trying to use my Google Assistant app asking if I'm tired of typing and that I can search with my camera. And actually, I have been searching with my camera. I've been renovating the house, so whenever I see some furniture that I like when I'm out and about, I take a picture with it and search for the product with a camera, which is really cool. But it is a new search behavior that we didn't really used to have before. I've also been searching on Instagram whenever I'm on a restaurant and the menu makes no sense to me. I just go on Instagram for the restaurant to see what I can expect from them. I try to get product reviews or evaluations, looking on TikTok. So we have evolved the way that we search. Obviously, factual information is probably still best searched typed into the search box. But if you're looking for products, for experiences, it is best that as SEOs and marketing professionals, we think about how we are going to future proof our businesses by taking this content omni-channel where there is a rise of user searching and lower competition. So that is one of my favorite advantages of going headless. Now, for the disadvantages, if you've been on WordPress, you're probably familiar with this, right? Especially Yoast, Rank Math, WP Rocket to improve your performance. Yeah, that's not going to happen with a headless CMS. You will need to build those integrations yourself or work with a provider that has these integrations. At Sanity, for example, we've got a Yoast integration that we just updated yesterday to work with the latest Yoast features, but you cannot take that for granted. In fact, you cannot take anything about your technical setup for granted, which is what we're going to cover in the second part of this webinar. You need to ask for everything. And if you have been on WordPress or monolithic CMSs for a while, you can be a little bit, I don't want to say spoiled, but you have been lucky not to have to think very deeply about your technical setup, depending on what vertical you're on. And a question that I get all the time is headless better for SEO? And I think you know the answer. Depends. I hate I hate that it depends is such a common answer in SEO. I like to give you better answers, so I'm going to go a little bit deeper. Traditional CMSs can be perfectly fine. My personal website is on Wix, and I like using Wix that way. I don't have complex content problems or ambitious goals for my website. So it's just okay. But if you want to do more, you need to move to a headless setup. So when is headless better? It's when you need to or want to reuse content across channels. What reusing content across channels allows you to do is to keep your content always up to date across all of your channels, always consistent, and keep your brand voice also consistent across your channels. One of the reasons that I moved to Sanity is because I was working on a very complex internationalization project, and internationalization can be such a pain and it can get complex so fast. With a headless setup, it can be much easier and much faster. You can connect directly to translation APIs or have a better model of how your content is going to be um, lifted from your core market, translated and localized, and shifted onto your um, target markets from later. And essentially, I really like headless because it can virtually connect to anything that has an API. So obviously, if you've not been living under a rock, you've heard about ChatGPT. You can virtually connect your headless CMS to ChatGPT to generate descriptions. Um, our team at Sanity has done something really clever that I really like, which is they auto generate summaries of our pages from like with an AI model. I believe it is GPT-3. I'm not sure if it's with the ChatGPT API, but we generate the summaries and then internally we can find our own content much easier thanks to those summaries. Right, so now that we have kind of covered if headless SEO is better and what is a headless CMS, I have some tips on how to remember how to do the basic technical SEO and what to ask for when you're working with developers to get the right headless SEO setup. Something that I have found talking to some of our clients and other people in the industry is that many developers will tell you that something is not possible or you will assume that something is not possible because it's not where you expect it to be within your CMS. Essentially, almost everything is possible when you're going headless, and it is about having that conversation and making the right request to your team at the right time. So let's dig into the 6 things that you need to remember to ask for. The very first one is you need to request all the key meta tags, everything, um, down to the viewport. When you see this guide and you see this lovely page, I need to remember when I'm building the content model to creating this guide, I need to remember to ask my developers what I want exactly on the guide. So, for example, you're seeing a H1. I want this H1 to become my meta description. Sorry, my meta title. Maybe I have a summary somewhere in the piece and I want it to become the description. I need to request the um, OG description, OG web, so all the open graph tags. Ensure that the canonical is implemented correctly and be super clear with my meta robots. This one might seem obvious, but you need to make sure that your CMS allows content editors an editable URL slug because you don't want to end up with alphanumeric fields that make absolutely no sense to the user. And you don't want to end up with something that simply pulls from a field within your piece of content. You want to end up with something that you have chosen specifically for your page, especially in high stake pages. You need to make sure that canonicals are implemented correctly. So you're going to have to communicate this to your developers. And I know this seems super obvious and simple, but I have seen things, especially working in international projects or where different layers of tech that are interacting with each other. Um, I just want to be very clear when I'm making the request for the content models on my marketing website, what I want to see. So remember, when you're requesting the canonical implementation, you need to be including absolute URLs, and that includes the domain and the protocol, so the whole HTTPS and so on. You need to be clear that it's only one canonical per page, just the one. Oh, sorry. Yes, and if you're working on a simple marketing page, you're likely going to float through this, no problem. But if you're working maybe with an e-commerce that has complex filters, you might need to set up some rules with your dev team on how you want those canonicals to happen. Um, then you're going to have to work with your, oh, sorry, this is not updating here. You're going to have to work with your XML sitemap setup. Again, you're probably familiar with this beauty. Forget about it. Just forget it exists. It's much better for everybody. You're going to have to explain to your developers exactly how you want your sitemap to work. Create a validation rule so that only 200 indexable and canonical URLs get added. Be very explicit with the fact that this is a dynamic file. And pieces of this file are going to come in and pieces of this file are going to come out. So you need to make that dynamic super clear, and maybe think about an update frequency for your sitemap. So do you want to update your sitemap automatically, like trigger an update every time you make a change on your site? Is that going to be too much, or is that going to be susceptible to breaking? Have a conversation with your team and maybe, um, yes, come up with exactly what you need, um, and how you're going to go about it. And if the sitemap's not going to live in the root, as we all know, you must indicate it on the robots.txt file. The reason that I include this here is because nothing is a given on a headless setup. Nothing is a given, nothing is a limitation. I don't want to be a headless hater at all. because obviously I love it. But yeah, be clear that if it's not going to live on the road, you need to indicate it on the robots.txt. Also, we've been talking about marketing websites, but you might be needing a lot more. If you are on news or if you are image heavy, video heavy, you might need those independent sitemaps created as well. So make sure to have that same conversation for every type of sitemap that you need. Now, a super advantage of working with headless or a structured content type of headless CMS is that all of your content is stored in your data layer as JSON. And you know who loves JSON? Google. Um, JSON, as in JSON LD, is a way of providing structured data using the schema.org markup. And since your content, all of your content is already stored like that, you can create some rules to pull that type of content from your database and present it on a JSON script with your content. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that with a headless setup, it's much easier to enrich your files, your documents with JSON LD, a document or field level. That's going to make it easier for Google to understand what your page is about. Oh, and a really cool thing that you can do here is add validation rules that are going to avoid breaking Google's guidelines. When I was working on our resources, creating our resources content model at Sanity, I thought of building a little bit of frequently asked questions section at the bottom, like most people do for SEO, you know? But that's ugly for the user and it doesn't really make sense when you're reading a piece of content and at the very bottom you've got frequently asked questions. And when you actually look at the questions, those questions are not asked frequently and they were probably already answered before in the text. So what is this? Why is this blog of useless content for the user in there? We didn't like the UX of that, so we decided to come up with a different idea. I thought, let's just feed in the JSON LD on a section on the CMS where you go frequently asked question number one, type in the question, type in the answer, and then this goes on a script. But when you read Google's guidelines, you'll see that anything that's not literally word by word on the page would be breaking those guidelines if you added on the frequently asked questions schema. So we were either relying on selecting the content somehow or making sure that our editors were being careful with this. We didn't want to rely on that, so we decided instead we were going to automate it. Now, every heading in our content that ends with a question mark is presented in the schema as a question, and the paragraph immediately below is presented in the JSON schema as an answer. That allows me to have frequently asked questions schema across my website at scale. I think it's really cool and it's never going to break Google's guidelines. So it's one of the use cases that I really enjoy where using tag, you can improve your SEO, but also improve the UX and make those blogs of frequently asked questions obsolete because they are boring and annoying. Sorry, it's a day for hot takes. Now, because you've been creating this content and you've been creating these content modules, thinking of fields, not of pages, you're going to need to validate that your headings hierarchy is working just fine when it actually goes live. You can create some validation rules and work on them with your development team, or you can check them manually and build elements within your CMS that allow you to tweak what the headings are going to be at each point. Now, we're coming to a close of what my presentation is. We're going to be doing a Q&A, but if this has made you curious at all, you can try Sanity for free with a boosted plan. All you have to do is go to sanity.io/SEO community. You'll see all of our resources around SEO, free templates that you can just spin up really quickly. And yeah, a promo code for a free boosted plan. So take it for a spin, give it a try. And thank you very much. I think we're going to be welcoming back Alina at any time now.
Great, Lydia. Thank you very much. This was really actionable and helpful. You've shared great tips and points of view. Thank you very much. Thank you for the examples and differences between Headless CMS and common ones. So now let's take a few minutes to answer questions of our attendees. Guys, please type your questions into your YouTube control panel. So, and you have several minutes before we pick them up. And now we'll start with the questions you guys sent us before the webinar. We have four ones. So, Lydia, could you please explain with as many examples and details as possible what Headless CMS is? Maybe you have some more examples.
Well, a headless CMS is essentially a separation of the view layer from everything else that you've got within your tech stack. Um, that separation makes a lot of sense as we've been evolving. Like when the website started, I remember I went to this course on computer skills when I was like 6 because I was a very small nerd, and we would be building pages on front page. I don't know if anybody remembers Microsoft front page, but I built a beautiful website about unicorns when I was 6 using Microsoft front page. And then a few years later, I was using Dreamweaver. So websites were kind of mostly coded or hard coded on HTML with very little functionality, very little beauty and design going on. And it was obviously nothing was responsive. And traditional CMSs emerged as a response to how unsustainable that approach to building websites and putting content on the internet was, right? And they were a perfect solution at the time. Um, and I really have like nothing bad to say about WordPress or any of the traditional ones if you're trying to just have a bit of an online presence, right? Now, if you're trying to do something a little bit more complex, and as the expectations of customers grow, you you kind of need to deliver a little bit more than you were delivering before. And we've been we've gone from very simple or from more simple businesses to operations that need a lot more of technical complexity. When we're adding in layers of a drop shipper provider within your tech stack, or maybe you've got um, different front end that allows your website to be more performant. Maybe you've got an app now and you don't want to have your team wasting time updating content first on the website, then on the app, right? You want to bring them together. So it just makes sense to make it a little bit leaner and a little bit smarter and save time for your editorial teams that now they only have to worry about creating the content once to distribute it everywhere. I think the most important thing to understand about headless CMSs is how they have emerged. They have emerged as a response, um, as a response to this need for a solution to more complex content problems. Most businesses don't just have their brick and mortar store and a little website. Many businesses are digital native and don't just have one website. They have several websites that they have with different brands or international websites where stock and prices changes between countries. Regulated markets are also great at using headless CMSs so to unify their content databases and tag what can be said in this country but cannot be said in this other country. Essentially, the coupling the view layer, no longer thinking about content goes to website, but content goes to all of these channels is the most important thing to understand. about headless CMSs and why we need them.
Great. Thank you for the detailed and fascinating explanation. So, one more question. When it comes to headless SEO, CMS, how to plan for EEAT?
That is a good question. And I think what I like doing with my headless CMS for EEAT is creating these really rich author pages. So all of my main authors at Sanity have their own author page where we talk about, all the classic expertise features like how many years of experience do they have in what industry and what is their role and what do they do. You can transform all of that into person schema, enrich the person schema, and then when you're putting this author as the author of the article, you can pull in all of that author schema that is living on that other page. Just have it automatically pull through to your main page and say, "This is the author." And yes, Google, you could go to the author page and pull this schema and understand about them. But we're going to make this a little bit easier for you. So here's all of the information about this author. Enjoy. You know, Another thing that I like to do is doing something similar with reviewers. So my reviewers also have pages. We have a pretty solid review process where somebody from the dev team needs to review some of the content. Some people from product make sure that the product claims that we're making make sense. Some people from solutions engineering ensure that the stuff that we are saying about our customers or the solutions that we build also makes sense. So all of these people have expertise and have spent time in those pieces of content in order for us to display that, hey, this is not just written by this amazing author, it's also reviewed by all of these experienced people. We pull through that type of schema on the articles as well. And because of the structured data approach, we can nest the schema really easily. So I think that's a decent tip for EEAT in a headless SEO era.
Great. Thanks. And not to waste a lot of time, one more question. At what volume of search traffic does headless WordPress become a good idea, and what is too small? I have been told it's tough to set up.
It is tough to set up. I I think if you don't have any level of developer resource, you should not go with a headless setup. But most people, even on WordPress, to get any type of customization on your templates and your pages, you're likely going to need a developer. So I'm going to assume that most people have at least some developer resource. It's really not about the level of traffic that you've got at all. A headless CMS is not difficult to set up or more difficult than a monolithic one, but you definitely need that developer resource. I would not have been able to build my personal website with my level of coding skills. I would have had to hire someone or ask my husband. Yes. The SEO developer relationships in this house work really well. Um, I would say it's absolutely definitely not about the volume of traffic that you've got, but about whether or not you have ambition for your content or a complex content problem that you need to solve, such as internationalization, different sources of content, or deploying content to different channels.
Great. So, one more, and the last question from the list. Is headless SEO a proper approach for e-commerce?
Yes, definitely. E commerce is one of our favorite use cases. So you might be familiar with the Kardashians. The Kardashians are Sanity clients, I guess. If you've ever gone on the Skims website, that's built with Shopify and Sanity, I believe. I hope I'm not wrong. If someone from Solutions Engineering is watching this and I'm wrong, please don't tell my manager. But no, I think it is Shopify and Sanity. Um, what I really love about Headless for e-commerce is how the headless approach frees you up to create product pages that really reflect your product and your brand. If you have been online shopping lately, you probably have a very clear schema in your head of what a product page looks like, right? So we've got a title, we've got an image of the product, we've got a tiny description, I guess, we've got a price, and we've got maybe some more images of the product, some reviews, a bit of an accordion menu where you've got product description and dimensions and other stuff that you should know and related products. Now, why are we buying really high stakes lifestyle purchases with the same product template that we would say we would use to sell, I don't know, like a glass a glass of water or a pen. You know, like that's a very low stakes purchase that I don't care about. So when you can reflect how important the product is or how all the other aspects that come into making that buying decision for high stakes products or high stakes purchases, you're going to end up with much more satisfied users and higher conversion rates, which end up probably in higher revenue. Um, Now, this is especially relevant for D2C merchants because D2C like D2C people or brands that sell through distributors are losing two very important things to their distributors. They're losing margin, so they're losing profit, and they are losing customer insights. If it is the same experience for me to buy some shoes out of Amazon that it is to buy them on Adidas, I'm gonna buy them on Amazon. It's probably even cheaper, you know. Adidas is going to miss out on that margin that Amazon's gonna take, and they're going to miss out on the cookie that they could put on my browser. They're going to miss out on my email address. They're going to miss out on my consumer behavior. Now, when I'm shopping in the high street and I'm looking for Adidas shoes, I could go to like a retailer that has several different brands, or I could go to the Adidas store. And I go to the Adidas store because I receive a different experience that's a lot more tied to the type of purchase that I'm making and the values of the brand that I am buying from. If we could replicate that experience, and you can replicate that experience with headless commerce, um, D2C merchants and brands would be making more money, more profit, and they would be understanding their users a lot more.
Yeah, sure. Understand. So let's turn to the questions in the chat. I see the first question from Simon. Do you like to put the metadata in the top of the content form templates or as a separate tab section?
That depends on the content type that I'm working with. There's some content types that have a very straightforward place in my website. In that case, I usually have the title on top and the description at the bottom. I don't know why I have it like that. I guess it's because I think of the title first, or like the title's more tied up from to the headings. And then when I finish writing the article or I finish uploading it in there, I go like, oh, I need a meta description. Let's create one. So it makes sense for it to be at the bottom. At the bottom, I also have all the open graph tags. So it's kind of how it's happened for me. That's how I have it. I like having it like that. But then, depending on, there's some content types that I have the page creation on one type, and then this page is being pulled into another content type, and then that content type has the title, the description, the page that I want to pull, and then underneath the open graph tags.
Okay, thank you very much. So I see the question from Joseph. So if you'd like to share some content in the SSMM, for example, we'll build like a button or something and connect it through the API to the network we want, like let's say LinkedIn.
That is a super cool question, and it has to do with a project that I'm working on. So if you take your content distribution seriously, you probably have a bit of a framework, even conscious or unconscious, on how you do content distribution. Usually, when my with my own personal brand, I tweet an announcement. Well, I do like hype tweeting, but you couldn't automate that. Tweet an announcement, tweet a second announcement that uses the meta description, um, and then I make three more tweets through the month. I put it on LinkedIn. I make a LinkedIn carousel. Sometimes I use images from within the article. So if you can turn this workflow, this distribution workflow into explicit workflow, you could theoretically automate it entirely with a combination of your headless CMS and API integration with social media and potentially some AI, generative AI for the writing. So yeah, that is a super cool question, and it's got so much potential. You can even generate images with this approach. So on Sanity, you can connect. I'm not sure how you do it. It might be Tailwind CSS, but I might be wrong. We have a plugin that you can connect that generates your Open Graph images following the rules that you decide. So it might have a logo on your bottom left, the name of the author on your bottom right, and then the first prominent image that you've used in your article as the background, and the heading one as the title on top of the image. And all of that can be generated automatically. So you could potentially generate images to share your article with, or even LinkedIn carousels to share your article with that way. Like, for example, if you wanted to auto generate a carousel with questions and answers every time that you post something new, you could do it.
Great, thanks. It looks like a great solution.
It's really fun.
So, yeah. One more question from Steve. I'm wondering how scalable Headless is. By that I mean, we often review sites that have already been built. If I wanted FAQ schema added, will that make the devs cry that it won't initially asked for?
That is a super good question, Steve. That is an issue that comes with the content modeling that whoever has built that site has done. It might be that the content modeling that they've created is not future proof. It might be that they've not thought about how the website's going to scale in the future, or it might be that it has, you know. I have found I'm very lucky to work with extremely competent developers. And every time that I've needed to make one of those tweaks, I've had a very positive response from the team. But it might be that you are finding yourself struggling because of a outdated or a content modeling that has left you a little bit stuck. Um, it's essentially like the tech debt of content. You're going to need to address it eventually, and the longer it takes you, the harder it's going to be. Now, you could use some CMS providers, some vendors as partners in order to make those changes and collaborate with your CMS's engineering team, solution engineering team, to help you with that. And it also comes down to the choice of the CMS that you've made. There are some CMSs that don't allow for a very flexible content modeling. I don't think I'm allowed to name any, but yeah, some of our competitors can be a little bit rigid with content models that would not allow you to actually scale very long term that content that you've got. But if you are having this issue like right now, I would say have a conversation with your development team about it and do treat an outdated content modeling the same way that you would treat technical debt.
Great, that makes sense. Here's the question from Simon. How do you get your content editors to provide all the meta elements needed for the website when the main focus of the content might be an app, fridge, food screen, etc., where the meta isn't used?
All right, so all the meta elements needed for the website. the main focus of the all right, so you're thinking they're building content for an app, fridge, food screen, and how do you get them to also provide all the stuff for the website? That's what I understand for your from your question. It should be, I think the way that I would approach that is the content that's going on those more secondary channels would be recycled from a primary content that goes on the website. If that's not the case, I would add validation to your model that doesn't allow publishing until the bare minimum of all the other fields has been filled out.
Okay, thanks. Um, and here's the question: can we do image SEO in Headless CMS?
Yes, absolutely. I love this question. I recently saw an excellent talk by Miriam Jessier on the Women in Tech SEO Fest about image SEO that was extremely thorough. Um, I think yes, you absolutely can do image SEO in a headless CMS. Um, you need to take into account how your like the asset management that your CMS offers and how you're pulling all of those images onto your content with your content model. So asset management wise, do you I can tell you about what we do at Sanity. It's probably better to understand it that way. So you can resize the images, create hotspots that allow you to reuse all of these images in different places within your website, but still ensure that the main piece of the image is still going to remain visible. So if you have a big picture, like a full body picture of me, but what matters most is my face, um, you can hotspot my face. And then if you're using a bigger image, you can have like maybe half of my torso. But if you're using a tiny image or a round image, the hotspot's gonna remain there, right? Regardless of the proportion. If you didn't have the hotspot option and you had a tiny image, but like a tiny space for an image, but my whole body in the picture, you'd probably end up like with my belly in the picture in the round thing where my face should be. So we don't want that. You can add all of the metadata that you need. Like we work with some museums. So we've got museum grade metadata available for you to use on your asset management section within the CMS. But then you need to make sure that you request or that in your content modeling you use the file name of your image within the URL, right? And then this is on the asset management side. When you're putting it on the content, you want to make sure that you're pulling in the alt tag that you have provided for the image in the asset management. So you don't have to rewrite it, but you might want to rewrite it. So you could ask for a rewrite option within the CMS, like a field that allows you, if you fill it out, it gets rewritten. If not, it's pulling from the asset management section. So to your answer, yes, and you can do it much more scalable. You can do it easier, and it's a delight because also most headless CMSs, or at least we do, provide some image optimization on the fly. So your images are always going to be performant and your website's going to be, in theory, faster.
Awesome. Um, Question from Paulina. Great question. Just for a newbie for me. Um, what the most important things should SEO consider when working with Headless CMS website for the first time?
It depends on whether you have created it, like have you been part of the creation and the content modeling or not. If you are part of the content modeling, you should go through the checklist of stuff that I have shared here today and see, like make sure that you make all of these requests and then you validate all of these requests before, like on a testing environment, and then validate again on production. Now if you have not been part of that content modeling or the building of your website, I would advise that you audit for the elements that I have shared here today and see if that's not working, why not, and how do you fix it. Now, I would also recommend that you create a reusable object within your CMS that allows you to manage indexation and that allows you to manage your title and your meta description. If the URLs are broken, that's going to be a much bigger issue.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I see one more question in the chat. It seems it will be last question. If you have time for another, last site I reviewed for was a Sanity designed one. It was super fast with great page experience scores. Is that commonplace with Headless?
I would say yes and no. So, Steve, it sounds like you need to slide into my DMs because I want to talk to you about this site that you've reviewed and get your thoughts. But I think, and I like saying this, some people on my team disagree, but I think you can do much better on headless that you could potentially do on monolithic, but you could fuck up much harder on headless than you could fuck up on monolithic, right? You can achieve performance that you would not achieve on monolithic with headless or that you wouldn't as easily achieve on monolithic because you have full control of your front end, right? Everything that's going to happen on the front end, you decide. Your developers can make that happen. Now, if you've got good developers who know how to do web performance optimization without messing up your SEO, that's fantastic. But if you don't, you can end up worse than with monolithic. That said, statistically speaking, yes, it is more likely that your website's faster. With headless, there was a study on web performance optimization by CMS done by Estela Franco. Um, I'm not sure if I can share it with Lolina so that she can share it with you, or just slide into my DMs. It sounds like we've got stuff to talk about anyway.
Great, thanks. It looks like we've covered all the questions. Oh, okay, one more. Um, If I understand correctly, for Headless SEO, you need developers which are far more experienced than the day-to-day WordPress developer. Does this make it inapplicable for most small and mid-sized business?
No, I don't think you need developers that are more senior. Not necessarily. There are WordPress developers that are incredible. It's just different tech stacks. It's absolutely nothing to do with who's more senior. In fact, a WordPress developer can, if they're like front end developers, can probably very easily swap between one tech stack and the other. Not a developer cannot say that for sure, but yeah, it's not about seniority. In fact, many developers are now coming into the workforce or the industry with knowing mostly JavaScript, and JavaScript is one of the biggest elements of Jamstack CMSs, and Sanity is part of the Jamstack approach to putting content online.
Great. Thank you very much for your answers. And for now, I can't see any other questions. So I just remind you guys that Serpstat can help with your SEO routine. It includes over 50 tools. I'll add the QR code here if you'd like to start a free trial. So use this QR code. So um, uh, SERPstat includes over 50 tools, including 14 AI tools for SEO and PPC professionals, marketing experts, and big digital agencies. So you can analyze website and competitors, create content, collect keywords, check backlinks, find on-page SEO issues, cluster tons of keywords, track daily rankings, and many more. So that's almost all from me. What else would you like to add or highlight before we wrap up, Lydia?
Just that if you want to try headless, head to sanity.io/SEO community. Get a
Oh,
free one.
sorry. I'm so sorry.
Was I not on the screen? Was I talking to myself?
I'm
All
sorry.
right. If you want to try headless, try the free boosted plan that we have on Sanity. On the website, on the page that I'm sharing, You've got different resources on how to do headless SEO well. You've got the plugins that we offer and different guides, including one guide on e-commerce SEO and especially e-commerce SEO for headless merchants, written by Kevin Indick.
Great. Thank you very much. So lastly, I'd like to remind our attendees to follow Lydia's and Serpstat social media. Check out our future webinars and Serpstat chat on Twitter. There on social medias, you'll find a lot of actionable SEO tips from Lydia and from Serpstat. So Lydia, thank you for sharing your knowledge, for your time today, for your great presentation, tips, examples. And thank you all guys for joining us today for this informative webinar on Headless SEO. We hope you will take the lessons and strategies that you have learned today and apply them to your own work. And we hope to have the opportunity to connect with you again in the future. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.